Maryland is blessed to have 4 historically black colleges and universities. I'm Jonathan Yates, and here today on the Culture of Sports, we're indeed fortunate to have the athletic directors from each. We're going to start off in alphabetical order with Mr. Dowdy from Bowie State University, who's going to introduce himself and tell us a little about his school. Mr. Dowdy.
Clyde Dowdy, Jr. I am blessed to be the athletic director at Bowie State University. I'm going to my 4th year as a Bulldog. I hail from New York originally. My background in athletics, I've been in intercollegiate athletics for over 30 years. Bowie State University is a Division II institution in the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association. Bowie State sponsors 13 intercollegiate sports, and we're very proud of the success of our student athletes from an academic perspective, an athletic perspective, and a social perspective.
Mr. Carter.
Hello, Derek Carter. I'm the Director of Athletics at Coppin State University. Coppin State is the member of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. We're Division I, and we sponsor 14 sports for intercollegiate athletics. I am born and raised in Washington, D.C. I've been at Coppin State University for almost 2 years now. As Clyde stated, we too are very proud of what we do with our student athletes. We have student athletes from very diverse backgrounds, and we work hard to ensure that they have a positive experience. We work hard to ensure that academically, athletically, socially, they are developing as young men and women, and we want them to walk away from Coppin State with a degree, and with more than a degree, an education.
Mr. Stinson from Lincoln University.
Yes, Harry Stinson, Athletic Director and President of the Recreation Services on the campus of Lincoln University, the first historically black college and university to grant degrees just 4 miles over the border of Maryland into Pennsylvania. Happy to be here, reaching my first year as Athletic Director, and proud of our accomplishments that we've done so far. One of the institutions that has nearly all of our athletic programs with over 3.0 GPA. So very proud of that, and looking forward to being on this panel.
Well, we look forward to hearing about more of the accomplishments. Mr. Scott from Morgan State University.
Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
Oh, fine.
Athletic Director at Morgan State University. I've been there just over a year and a half now. Previously was at George Washington, so I was in the area. We are very close to Mr. Carter and Coppin. We sponsor 14 sports as well. We're part of the MEAC, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. We're also Maryland's preeminent public research institution. We're very excited about that designation we recently got soon. Like my colleague spoke about before, our focus for our student athletes is in 4 primary areas. Number 1 is creating leaders in the classroom. Number 2 is competition. Number 3 is the community. And then 4 is creating leaders for life. So when they leave Morgan, they have a degree and they're prepared to compete for jobs and their passions the same way they do for their starting position. And we're very proud of what we've been able to do recently.
Thank you for joining us. And from coming across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge from the Eastern Shore, Mr. Davidson.
Hi, Jonathan. My name is Keith Davidson, Director of Athletics at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. I've been there for 15 years, 12 of which as Athletic Director. We participate in 15 Division I sports, and we are a public research institution as well, a doctoral granting institution. I think I also we're part of the MEAC. Mm-hmm. Our core values are scholarship, sportsmanship, and citizenship, and those are the 3 areas we seek to develop in young people. I'm a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm a graduate of Lincoln University.
You go. In the house, yes.
And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much. So, the sports world today is talking about everything else other than this show, especially the Caps that won the Stanley Cup last night. There's nothing like sports to bring us together. As President Obama said, sports brings us together. It touches the heart in a way that politics and business does not do. So, Mr. Scott, other than me, you're the youngest in this room. So why don't you tell us about how you've seen sports bring the community together in your career, both as a player and in college sports administration?
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't say where I'm from. I'm originally from Kingston, New York. I did my undergrad and was a student athlete at the University at Albany, where I played baseball. And I can tell you, as you all know better than I from the history, baseball is a sport that really broke the color barrier. But if you start to see the trends in collegiate baseball today, there's less and less African Americans. It's somewhere about 2% in Division I baseball. So for me, I had a really diverse experience being a student athlete at the University at Albany and being a minority, one of very few to compete at that level. So as a student athlete, I got to see how sports can cross ethnic and racial and cultural barriers. And now, you and I have talked about this before, what we've created with Towson, one of the only natural rivalries between an HBCU and a PWI because of our proximity. We created the Battle for Greater Baltimore, which had a wonderful draw this past year, and we'll be playing that game on September 1st at Hughes Stadium this year. So we're really excited. So I think, as you've alluded to, and President Obama is absolutely correct, sport is a vehicle to unite folks from different backgrounds, and I think it's our job as athletic directors to make sure we focus on that in this community.
I think Mr. Dowdy, it was another championship season at Bowie State, so how did the sports bring the community there over in Prince George's County?
Well, sports has always galvanized people. As you know, college athletics wasn't determined by college athletics, determined by society at large, and society at large loves competition. Sports is just a way of competing and enjoying themselves, and folks to come together. We have had an opportunity to have a good run this year on a lot of sports. We were able to sustain a championship season, our 4th in a row for our women's bowling team. And the bowling team is very unique because we don't have bowling alleys on campus, so folks have to travel to see them participate. And we had a good following watching them participate, and for them to capture 4 CIAA championships in a row and then move on to the NCAAs was quite a feat for the ladies and the program. Our football team, although they didn't win a championship, we hosted a NCAA first-round football contest, and that really brought alumni, fans, the community out to watch us participate. We had an exciting offense that was on display with Amir Hall, who was the Black College Player of the Year. So that was a big, an exciting moment for the university. And our women's basketball team surprised a lot of folks by getting to the Sweet 16 this year in the NCAAs. So we had a good year on and off the field. And academically, it was an outstanding year because we had over 90 plus student athletes who made the inaugural AD's honor roll this year, over 3.25. So we're very proud of that as well, Jonathan.
So, Mr. Carter, you've brought back a Baltimore legend in Juan Dixon to coach your basketball team. How has he brought the campus together?
Coach Dixon has done an outstanding job of bringing the campus together. The first thing, so many people know who Juan Dixon is, and people remember him from his success at the University of Maryland and all the things he did, allowing University of Maryland to win their first national championship. And then as he proceeded on to the NBA and had a solid NBA career. So it was great to bring him back, and what he has done is allowed the Baltimore community, which is his home, as well as Maryland, the DMV, which everyone is familiar with him. So they've embraced him and embraced the fact that he can now go into high schools, he can go into parents' homes, and the recognition is a wonderful thing. And they get to know who he's about, what he stands for. He has aligned himself with the mission and the goals of Coppin State University. And what he's doing is slowly, but he's developing a program with good players who are focused on academics, and not only what he's doing for his team, but it's spreading to our other teams. Our coaches do a great job of sharing ideas, working together, so that not only can men's basketball be successful, but all of our programs across the board can gain success through the exchange of ideas and everything. So again, Juan's name has brought us great recognition, but everyone else is feeding off of what he's able to do for us.
So, Mr. Stinson, in your first year at Lincoln University, how have you seen sports bring the community there together?
Well, for the most part, it's been doing little things to galvanize the community and bring them in. We're sitting in a more rural area than some of my colleagues who are in the city. So us finding ways to bring folks from Philadelphia, from Delaware, from Maryland, and a lot of that comes from what we do on campus with our events. One of my goals is to make sure that we have the most well-run athletic events to build a culture and to just bring in folks from all over the communities. So
Is that
just
working?
10 years ago, we just started football, and now we're celebrating that honor and bringing everybody back. So that's been a big
That's
draw to bring
obviously
some of the
working,
community
yeah.
back in.
What's wonderful. So, Mr. Davidson, if they think they're in a rural area, I think you talk all of them over there at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore out in Crisfield. How do you bring the community out there?
Well, we work on that by encouraging our student athletes to be leaders in their community. It's not lost on me that athletics a lot of times is at the center of social change in our country over the past century. You know, whether it's Jackie Robinson or Jesse Lewis or Muhammad Ali or Billie Jean King, we try to promote an idea of being part of something bigger than yourself and their responsibility to their society and to their communities. And with that, that draws attention to them and the campus towards our events because they want to be a part of that. We encourage our student athletes to be visible on campus, to support one another at events that they're not necessarily participating in. And it's starting to become infectious. And so we're really proud of the attendance that we get because we are rural. A lot of times we're the only Division I game in town, and there may not be a whole lot to do. So that also helps us out. We got a captive audience, so to speak, on the Eastern Shore.
So, Mr. Davidson, speaking of something bigger than yourself, it's not well known, but the University of Maryland Eastern Shore holds the record for having the most players in a Super Bowl at any one time, 5 in 1968. How do you imbue this legacy of excellence in an HBCU to today's student athletes who are into video games and other things?
It's something that we're awful proud of. We share that distinction with Florida State. We have worked to get that to be part of our freshman experience and something that we focus on and try to highlight in our Hall of Fame. In addition to that, you know, we like to also focus on the fact that we've had over 25 young men participate in the NFL before we ended football in 1979. Matter of fact, Art Shell is the captain of our Hall of Fame, which is the first African American head coach in the modern football era. Roger Brown, Claude Harrison, a number of young men who have put great careers.
Emerson Boozer,
Emerson Boozer, Charlie Stoops, Johnny Sample. So we have a rich history that we try to promote. Art Shell has a golf classic that helps to bring those guys back, and so it's difficult these days with young people. I was talking to a group of student athletes about Michael Jordan, and they kind of looked at me, and I realized that I should have used LeBron James.
Michael Jordan is old school now. Wow.
And so it can be difficult, but what we try to do is involve them in our Hall of Fame activities and our homecoming activities where we're able to bring those guys back, and we're able to kind of create a bridge from the student athletes that are on our campus today and the ones that have really laid the foundation for them to be able to participate in athletics now.
So, Mr. Stinson, as a varsity athlete from Florida State, how do you bring home the rich legacy of an HBCU to today's athlete at Lincoln University?
Well, one of the first things that we started doing was showing our history. So we have a room on campus that has a timeline of our whole history. We started football in 1894, 125 years ago, with 10 students going up to Rutgers and going up to Princeton to study football for 2 years before bringing it back. So we talk about the legacy of us bringing back football. Us, you know, having games in Philadelphia where the Eagles played back in the early days in front of fans of 20,000. You know, having folks like Fritz Pollard, the first African-American head coach in the NFL, in the old era, not the modern era. But, you know, having folks like that, having folks, you know, come and be baseball athletes like Thurgood Marshall. So we talk about our history, we show our history, we have pictures, but we talk about our legacy, and we also talk about being champions. You know, Lincoln has 17 national championships in Division III in track and field. So whether you have scholarships or whether you don't have a scholarship, that shouldn't be a hindrance on you being a champion. So we want folks to be champions on the field and in the classroom, and we talk about how you can be a champion regardless of your background or anything of that nature. So we talk about our legacy, we talk about our history, we bring it all together and forge them to being great champions.
So, Mr. Carter, with an up-and-coming coach like Juan Dixon in an era when Michael Jordan is old school, how do you bring those values of HBCU legacy to the millennials who are your athletes?
You know, it's tough when you get into the conversations of who was the greatest and all that, and it's clearly
The GOAT.
Right, it's clearly a generational thing. But the great thing about young men and women who are involved in athletics, more often than not, they do appreciate the history of athletics. So you can oftentimes tie in stories about the legends of before their time, and surprisingly, they know more than you realize. And you know, you'll get into debates of who's who, and this is why, and all that. But surprisingly, they will have our current student athletes. They have great points, and they're able to express their points of view. So that's the great thing about athletics, is that it brings quality discussions and thoughtful discussions that you can kind of tie in the old and the new and do it effectively.
So, Mr. Dowdy, when the discussions of the GOAT comes up, how do you bring up Bowie State's rich legacy as an HBCU?
Well, I really don't start from an athletic perspective. I start, as Harry said, from a legacy, historical perspective, the 150 years that Bowie State University has been provided opportunities for young men and women to pursue an educational goal. And I think we have to do more of reaching, teaching, and educating in that vein. Athletics is just a means to an end, and all the people they talked about, like Art Shell, they're all doing something now other than sports. So we try to attack it from that perspective, Jonathan. I tell my young folks, the millenniums, the baby boomers, whoever wants to listen to me at the time, that we might lose a game or two, but we're never defeated. And if you go into any type of environment, either athletics, business, it's going to be competition. I tell folks that getting a degree doesn't guarantee you anything but a seat in the room with a bunch of other folks who are interviewed for a job. So we try to come from that perspective, on a hard perspective of enjoying your moment. Be in the moment, understand how you got here, and understand that moment is going to take you to the next step. So we try to attack this whole millennium by embracing what they're doing now. I don't discourage them for how they do their business, because they totally did. Social media, technology has changed how we need to manage their activities. But there's a piece that we have to allow them, or get them to allow themselves to understand the rich history that got them to this point.
And do you ever make the point to them that, you know, here I am an athletic director at Bowie State, I'm one of the top 100, 200 in my profession, but here I am working on my doctorate degree still?
All the time. I just came from the Korean Sports Forum, which I hosted for the last 8 years in Indianapolis. It's a collection of 240 student athletes that were picked out of 700 applications, Division I, II, and III, various backgrounds, various sports. And I sit there and tell you, I'm doing the same thing you're doing right now. I'm still pursuing my educational endeavors. Education never stops, inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and that's the key, that we're always learning, we're always getting better. So if we continue that mindset with every student, every person we come into, we're going to have a better society.
So, Mr. Scott, you're working towards your doctorate too. Do you use that to show the rich legacy at Morgan State as an HBCU in both academics and athletics?
I do. I think, you know, you got to lead by example, right? You can say things, but if you don't show and prove, especially with this group of young folks nowadays, then they're really not going to be engaged. And so there's times where I'm on the football bus and I got my books out, and I'm the athletic director. Guys walk by and look at me, and I say, there's no reason you can't study either, right? And so when you emulate that behavior, I think that the student athletes will follow that.
Have you noticed more studying on the bus now?
Well, I got to get it in wherever I can, right? I got a wife at home. I got other duties that are far beyond the office some days. So I got to make sure that whenever I get those free moments, that I manage my time properly. And that's really what we're trying to teach our students, because when they leave us, they're going to have to manage their time. They're not going to have people like us or academic support folks or coaches or whoever reminding them of what they need to do and where they need to be. To the point about the history and tradition, though, I think I do everything my colleagues do. The one thing we've tried this year, especially with football, and we have a rich tradition at Morgan, obviously in football with the 4 NFL Hall of Famers. We have, you know, Olympians from track, gold medalists and so on, Marvin Webster in basketball, the 10 Bears in lacrosse. So what we try to do is actually bring folks back and have them talk to and touch our student athletes. This year was the first year we were able to do in the football. We had what we call the Captain's Breakfast. We brought back 32 former captains, and we gave them all a few minutes to speak to the team. And I mean, the impact that had right before the spring game as well, I think was tremendous. So we're going to try to do some more things like that, because what happens is it creates relationships between those folks who have been in their shoes before and the current student athletes. Now they have mentors, they have additional resources that they can use, outside of just the athletic personnel.
Now, when I interviewed Brian Blair, the Senior Associate Athletic Director at Rice University, he said that college sports took him from being a small-town boy from Churchill, South Carolina, into a man ready to take on the world. You played college sports. What did college sports do for you as to develop him into a professional at the top of his game?
It changed my life. I mean, I owe everything that I have today, everything that my family has today, to the sport of baseball. I think Derek and Clyde talked about it extremely well. It's a vehicle. It was always a vehicle for me. My ability to hit a baseball and run really, really fast has gotten me 2 degrees. It's put me in a position to shape the lives of young people and give back to a tremendous university like Morgan State. So for me, the values that I have as a man, competition, diversity, teamwork, time management, right? How to deal with adversity. I mean, I can go on for hours about what I learned as a student athlete. And so there's not a day that goes by in my personal and professional life that I don't draw on my experience as a student athlete to get me through whatever I'm dealing with.
Mr. Dowd, you were a great college basketball player. How did that change you from when you entered to when you left? Not exactly a small-town boy coming from New York City, but still.
Well, to echo what Ed was saying, Maya Angelou has a famous quote that they might forget your name, but they won't forget how you make them feel. College sports made me feel great. I was involved with so many different people, so many different places that I wouldn't even think it would take. It took me all across the country. We flew to California, we were down in the South. Matter of fact, we played against Virginia Union in the national championship of the Division II and lost to Virginia Union. My first exposure to a CIAA school, that I didn't realize that one day I'd be sitting in a CIAA institution at a HBCU. So it had exposed me, Jonathan, to things that I really wouldn't. It exposed me. My coach taught us how to go to a restaurant and order. I didn't know what no appetizers were. We just wanted the meal. Let's go to McDonald's. What are we doing here? So that helped me become the man I am today, and it allows me now to teach the folks who need to pursue their goals on very different levels. When in Rome, you got to be like the Romans. So there's certain things you do in certain areas that some folks can't transition. So we have to teach folks, young people, how to transition, and it helped me do that in a big way. And it helped me network, because your net worth is your network. So I am able to network and meet great folks like this, great folks at the NCAA, and it continues to build. My pyramid continues to grow.
And so as successful as you've been, do they accept it readily?
Yes, because like Ed said, you lead by example. There's nothing I haven't done. I'll pick up the broom, I'll sweep, I'll walk with them in the same path that they're walking to, so they know that I'm right there walking side by side with them with everything they're doing. So if you have that kind of attitude, you show them that you are truly involved in their lives from a very, very soulful perspective.
So, Mr. Stinson, you were a varsity athlete at Florida State University. How did that change you, your 4 years there?
I think it helped me the most dealing with adversity. The first bit of adversity is we're all great when you get to a Power 5 institution. And, I ran track, so, I thought I was the biggest and fastest guy, hurdler coming out of the state of Florida. And, you get in a race and you look to your left and look to your right. You're dead even with everybody else. So, you're not the fastest of the fastest anymore. So dealing with that, dealing with the emotions of, how do you combat from a loss? How do you manage being a winner? When you can walk across the campus and see a coach like Bobby Bowden and all the things that he instilled into it, understanding what it takes to be a champion as it was at Florida State. So you take all those different things, and now I'm able to pour those things into our student athletes, understanding there's going to be emotions. How do we overcome those battles when you win and when you lose? So helping them manage their emotions, helping them become greater leaders, and being a leader within a team of leaders. And we preach that all the time about being a leader within leaders, being a team of teams. So, sports helps you develop in ways that other ways and means does not always translate. So it tremendously put me into a position to be a leader.
Mr. Stinson, when I was at Lincoln University interviewing you, I thought it was a very, very moving moment. There was a father there, and he had a son there who was a freshman football player, and you went over and comforted him and the coach, because the father was obviously very close, and you know, it was his little boy, even though he looked to be about 6'4", 320 pounds. Were you able to bring from your experience as a player to that father to help him, you know, let him know that his son was in good hands at Lincoln University?
Well, the first thing we teach is that we're going to teach with love. You know, we do everything with love. We're going to love you hard when you're doing well. We're going to love you hard when you're not doing well. So no matter what, you got a whole bunch of uncles and aunts that's going to take care of your son. And, you know, I want them to be comfortable enough that I tell students all the time, when you're not having fun anymore, that's when you come see me. That's when I take those times and work with you and your coach to kind of see why isn't playing athletics being fun anymore? Or if you're having things going on in your personal life, or you can't, you know, figure out things that's going on in the classroom. Now we can provide those resources. So, you know, want everybody to know that when you come to our institution, that you have a whole bunch of resources now. You have a whole lot of family that's going to help you along this 4 or 5 year journey.
So, Mr. Carter, how's college sports changed you through the development?
You know, for me, and I'll get to college sports, but for me, it really started in my high school days, attending DeMatha High School and having the opportunity to play basketball for Morgan Wooten really laid a foundation for me that really taught me the priorities of sports and how they relate to how you prioritize things in life. And I was able to transition that to college and playing at Virginia Tech and really a lot of the examples that you've heard, they're all absolutely true that, you know, it just prepares you for life. So what I've been able to do is just carry these examples. You have so many lessons in life from athletics that you really just try to mentor the student athletes that you work with and share experiences with them, but also be willing to listen to them and listen to what they have to share with you. As Harry said, you know, when they come to you, to your office, you want to have an open door with open arms and listen to them and try to give them direction, try to give them guidance so that they can be successful.
Was Coach Wooten's door always open to you as a player?
It was open as long as I hadn't messed up something.
So, Mr. Davidson, how did college sports change you?
Well, I'm a little bit different from my colleagues. I wasn't quite the athlete they were. I was more of a high school athlete than I was a college athlete. My claim to fame was I, you know, played high school basketball with Bill Self and against, you know, other great athletes that were in the state of Oklahoma. And I think that's the reason why, you know, I have a really great job, because it satisfies the frustrated athlete in me. So, athletic competition is, my involvement in athletics is what's kind of shaped me in terms of leadership, commitment, discipline, in those areas that we try to focus on our student athletes as it relates to the whole student athlete. You know, I'm going to take a minute and brag a little bit when we were talking about academics. You know, one thing I'm most proud of as athletic director is our graduation rate. We've had the highest graduation rate in the MEAC for the past 7 years. And we relinquished that to one of our members this past year. But those are what we're most proud of, is preparing kids, our student athletes, for the game of life. It's
So
great.
studying on the bus has been working out, Mr. Scott.
Well, it wasn't us this year. It was another one. We're getting very close to it. He knows we're nipping at his heels.
Some longer bus rides in the future from Morgan State.
So we like to focus on the entire student athlete, and athletic competition is one thing, and the characteristics that you develop in young people really help them move on and prepare them for life.
Now, Frederick Bachman, in a book called Britt Marie Was Here about soccer in small town Sweden, he said you could always tell who rooted for a soccer team by sort of their characteristics. He said if you rooted for Liverpool, you were like a scrappy underdog. So, Mr. Davidson, how would you describe the typical student athlete at University of Maryland Eastern Shore?
What I talk to our coaches about is we've made a conscious effort to really recruit character, and we want to recruit student athletes who are genuinely interested in matriculating towards a degree. I'm assuming that everybody we recruit is talented, okay? And we want to recruit the best, most talented student athletes who are available to us. But those are the two things that we want to focus on. One thing that's great about athletics, and I don't know about these guys, but it's not rocket science. That's why I'm in it, okay? And so what I tell my people all the time is let's keep it simple. Let's identify, and I talk to my coaches all the time, what is the one quality that you want every student athlete to have? And that's what we focus on. And all those other things fall into place from there. And we have to focus on student athletes who want to be here. And our environment is unique. And so we have to realize that, and we have to, in the recruiting process, know it when we see it. Okay, those qualities that we want and those qualities that we don't want. We have to be able to recognize it in the recruiting process in order to recruit the best student athlete who is going to fit our programs and who knows what it's like to be a Hawk.
And so in the recent graduation, who would you look at in the graduating class and say that's the example of a Hawk student athlete?
I have two really in mind. And they were, one young man just finished up this fall. One of our cross-country athletes, Mr. Kamini, he dominated cross-country and distance in the conference for 3 years. For 2 straight years, he was the male student athlete of the year. And last year, he was the MEAC man of the year. And in order to get that, they focus not only on your athletic accomplishments, but also your academic accomplishments, and also what you're doing in the community in terms of community service. And then last year also, too, we had a young lady, Tasina Suris, was a bowler of ours, who for the past 2 years was our female athlete of the year. And last year, she was the MEAC woman of the year. And she was an All-American bowler, 3-time MEAC champion. And those are the type of young people who we serve, we look at as examples. She was a great example, too, because this was a young lady who came to our university as a teenage mother from Aruba. And to see her develop over those 3 years, the support that she had from her parents, the lessons that she learned in terms of leadership and discipline, really was heartwarming to see. And not having her here and not having that leadership that she brought to our team was really noticeable this year on our bowling team. But I think it's those two athletes who really exemplify what we're trying to develop in young people and what it means to be a Hawk.
How was her leadership skills shown as captain of the bowling team?
She was a little bit more mature. Obviously, being an international student and the responsibilities. I find international students to be a bit more mature than American students. It takes a lot to leave home and travel to another country, and sometimes there's language barriers and things like that. I think the adversity she went through by being a single mother and the responsibility that brings really helped her grow up more. And so she was really able to kind of keep things in perspective with these young ladies as it related to competition and keeping things focused, not getting ahead of yourself. A lot of times in life we focus on yesterday and tomorrow instead of today. And I think that perspective that she brought to those young ladies, don't worry about tomorrow, yesterday, okay? You can't change that, okay? Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to take care of itself. We got enough to deal with what we have to deal with today.
And they embrace that philosophy.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Scott, what would we look for in a typical Morgan State student athlete that showed that they were a bear?
Well, I think the first thing that we look for is grit and resiliency. I mean, we're in the city of Baltimore like Derek is. I mean, it's a unique place, and I think both institutions represent Baltimore in different ways, but very well. And so it takes a unique student to want to come to Morgan. We have high academic standards. So it's got to be somebody who's going to come in and put the work in the classroom. But the reason why I say grit and resilience is because you're going to get knocked down, as all of us have talked about. I'm not worried about the most talented student athlete, and I'm talking about in the classroom and on the competitive fields as well. And the reason why is talent takes a day off. I want the students that are going to work through issues. When they don't perform their best, that they get back up, right? So if they fall forward, or if they fall on their back so they can look up and get up. I mean, those are the type of students that I want, because not every day is going to be easy. And our institution is about access and opportunity. And so a lot of the demographic that we serve is low-income, first-generation college students who have some financial need. And so they have to learn how to compartmentalize and understand that home isn't always perfect, but they still have to go to class. They still have to perform athletically, you know. And so there's a lot of competing interest on young people these days, especially the ones we're all recruiting. And so for me, I want the students that aren't going to quit, because if they're not going to quit, I won't quit on them, and there's no doubt in my mind that they'll be successful.
Now, walking across the stage for graduation, who could you point at and say that's the example of a Morgan State student athlete?
We have a ton of them, and I don't want to be unfair to any of them, but there's one young lady, you know, if I was going to pick the first name that came to mind, would be Danielle Thompson. As Keith talked about, she's an international student athlete. She came from the Bahamas. She was the captain of our tennis team. We called her the Beast. Derek knows because he oversaw the championship. I mean, she epitomizes grit and resiliency. And she was a leader for us. She took our team to the first championship since 1994 for our women's tennis program. They went down and played number 2 in the country, UNC Chapel Hill. She played the number 1 player for Chapel Hill, who was number 2 in the country. And she took 2 games from her, as many as was taken from her all year in the ACC. And that's a Morgan State student athlete. And so, you know, some of the comments, and I know Bubba Cunningham at UNC and some of their personnel, and some of the comments that we got were, we couldn't believe we were playing a MEAC institution the way your team played. And I think any athletic director will tell you, regardless of the wins and losses, what you want is how your student athletes compete, how hard they work, but most importantly, how they comport themselves. Right, because you want to get that email or that phone call saying you have first-class student athletes, and I think at the end of the night that's what allows us to sleep really good.
So, Mr. Stinson, who did you look upon walking across that stage in graduation and said that's a Lincoln University student athlete?
Well, as a first-time AD, sitting on the stage and the platform and watching your student athletes, looking out in the crowd, we got all our student athletes sashes that say student athlete. But what I was most proud of, out of our 225 student athletes, we had 36 that were summa cum laude, or magna cum laude. So when you kept hearing those names coming across, and they had that student athlete sash coming across the stage, it just made my chest, you know, go out a little bit further. But there were 3 student athletes. One was an international student, Amanda, who was from Europe. I'm not going to mess up her last name, so it's Amanda A. That's what we call her, Amanda A. Had confidence issues when she got to Lincoln, but 4.0 cumulative GPA, played basketball, 6'8", 6'9", 6'5", 6'5" student athlete, track and field and cross country athlete. 6'5".
There's comments to yourself.
She was 6'5". But she had confidence issues, of course, you know, with her height and everything else. But through track and field, through cross country, she was an epitome of a person to just go through whatever. We went to the cross country championship. She finished in 4th place. We get back, 6 a.m. workouts for basketball. She's there. Myself, I would have took a week off coming off a cross country championship. But that's the type of student she was. And to have a 4.0 cumulative GPA, you know, that's something to say about a student. Mariah Russell, who she was a volleyball captain for us. She went to the Career in Sports Institute with Clyde a week or so ago. She went from another major to now looking at sport as a career path for her. She had confidence issues, but through sport, through the folks that she used as resources, she was able to take things to the next level. And she also had a 3.7 GPA. And we had a football student athlete, transfer athlete, Andre Price, who had dreams and aspirations of going to the NFL. Those things didn't work out for him, but he got involved in an internship program with our women's basketball program. He ended up going from somebody who had a big old afro, big old cornrows, to being very clean cut. When I got to Lincoln, didn't own a suit. He has 4 now. You know, I like to take pride and say that he, took a little of my style.
Without question.
But he was somebody that transformed within 1 year. Went from having a 1.9 GPA to graduating with a 2.9 GPA. And a lot of that came from his studies this particular year. But the thing I'm most proud about is he has a job. He's also coaching at a local high school for alternative kids, because he wants to make sure that students that had his similar background have that foundation and base. So now he's a wide receiver coach for a high school in Delaware, and also did very, very well. Finished his last semester, his last academic year with over 3.0 GPA.
Did you expect him to go into coaching?
I did. But, you know, to see.
Do you think
his
maybe you
development
inspired
over
him not only with the 4 suits and the pocket squares, but maybe to follow a career in sports too?
Yeah, you know, just the fact of him wanting to help others, that's a big part of why he wants to do what he wants to do.
So, Mr. Carter, what would exemplify the Coppin State student athlete?
You know, we have, as we all do, we have many student athletes that we're extremely proud of. For Coppin State, you know, with our location, we are truly an urban institution. So what we really want to see out of our students in terms of the academic success, yes, the athletic success, yes, social development, yes, but there's also a civic responsibility to the community of Baltimore to be involved with the elementary schools, to really reach out to the young people of Baltimore and give them a sense of pride and a sense of vision that you can set goals and reach goals as the students and student athletes and students at Coppin State. And the example I'm gonna give you is one of our graduating seniors on our women's basketball, Candace Beverly. Candace was a 3-year starter for Coppin. And what Candace did in terms of maximizing opportunities in the summer and working internships in federal government jobs, and she walked away with graduating with a 3.7 grade point average. Because of the internships, she now has a security clearance that's greater than anybody, you know, because she's starting a job in August, and not only has she succeeded for herself, but the internships that she received, she is now providing those opportunities for some of her younger teammates to do the same.
And do you see them being inspired by her example?
Absolutely, absolutely, because they've seen a real example. Oftentimes we talk, but they saw a real world example of, you know, you do these internships, they will work in your favor, you work hard in the classroom, you're successful on the court, you graduate, you will get a job. So Candace has, you know, when you talk about an example of a student athlete at Coppin who really has checked off all the boxes, that's what Candace did.
So, Mr. Dowdy, I'm going to throw you a curveball on this. My mother graduated from Bowie State, and I remember watching Kevin and Keith Coates play football. I've always thought they were the example of what a Bowie State athletes. Tremendous football players, absolute stud linebackers on the field, nicest guys in the world. One's now a teacher. They're both very devout. So do Kevin and Keith Coates represent what Bowie State athletes look like to you too, sir?
Absolutely. We have a wonderful alumni association, and those individuals, as you mentioned, the twins, Keith and Coach, who are hysterical in their own right. They could be stand-up comedians. They take a lot of pride in their time at Bowie State University, and they do a tremendous job of giving back to our current student athletes by coming in, as my colleagues have said, speaking to the student athletes, being involved with them on a ground roots level. So that shows our current student athletes that it doesn't end when you graduate. It's a continuum that is ongoing as far as the development is concerned and the ability to give back. I'm very proud of our student athletes. Although we're in Prince George's County, suburban type of environment, we're right between DC and Washington, so we have a number of student athletes that Ed just categorized, and so did DC here, to travel to Bowie State University to get away from that inner city atmosphere and experience something different. And we get a lot of transfer students too, because sometimes folks this ain't your first choice. You want to get out of PG County, you want to get out of Maryland, you go someplace else, and you find out that, wow, this is not really my cup of tea, and I got to go back and start drinking something different. So we get a lot of folks who come back and make that adjustment. So I'm proud of the folks, like Ed said, who don't give up, who are quitters and understand their opportunity and make the adjustments. I hate to say change, because when you say change, people start panicking. So I say improvements and adjustments. They make the necessary adjustments to their situation, to their now, they make the necessary improvements so they can continue to grow in there now and move them towards the future. So, yes, we have a strong, nurturing body at Bowie State University, just like my colleagues have, which has allowed folks to grow from many different perspectives at John Hopkins.
So who graduating this year? We know about Kevin and Keith Coates, they're old school, but who this year were you particularly proud of? Did you look at and say that's what a Bulldog is all about?
I'm so proud of all of them to have finished their college degrees. I don't want to single out any one of them. There were a number of college graduates that walked across the stage and gave me a little nod when they went through, because they made, they started a task on their yellow brick journey and they finished this part of it. And now it's only going to now allow them to continue on their journey to do something else. So I'm very proud of each and every one of them. I'm even proud of the ones who didn't finish their degree, because now they understand that their eligibility is done. They still have something to do to complete. And all of them are coming back and finishing up their degree, because sometimes student athletes just don't finish in 4 years because of the environment they're in and the time commitments associated with being a student athlete. So I'm proud of the group, the coaches, the support staff, the university as a whole, for doing what they do to support individuals in their quest for excellence.
Now, you're from New York City, I'm from outside D.C., so when I interviewed you at Bowie State and I was talking to your students afterwards and they were coming up and I was asking about their interests, and a couple of them said NASCAR. How did you deal with those ones who had interest in NASCAR?
That's a beautiful thing, and that's what diversity is all about, So, television brings NASCAR into your home, and folks who, just like hockey, when I was growing up, I didn't know nothing about hockey until, I was able to experience
So now it's hashtag all caps, rock the red?
That's right, absolutely. So those types of things are exposed, and we need to expose our students to different things that they normally wouldn't be exposed to. Growing up in New York City, I didn't know anything about any lacrosse either until I went to Long Island. And I found it's a beautiful sport, and I really have become a lacrosse fan, especially now in
Jim
Beverly.
Brown was one of the greatest lacrosse players
Absolutely,
of all time.
and Matt Hassett, he went to high school there and up in Syracuse, but I didn't know anything about lacrosse and sticks. You give a brother a stick, man, you're in trouble. So, so now it's a different story, and we have now get that exposure.
Mr. Scott might want to disagree with you with Morgan State's history in lacrosse.
Well, they caused some trouble on the field. They gave those gentlemen some sticks and they won a national championship, so I'd have to agree with Clyde.
So, Mr. Carter, let me ask you a question. There's a saying in college sports: good coach, great athletic director; bad coach, horrible search committee. You recently hired Juan Dixon. What did you look for in going to hire Juan Dixon? What were the characteristics?
Yeah. Well, for Juan Dixon and any coach that I may hire, there are a lot of characteristics that you want to focus. I like coaches who are teachers. I like coaches who will spend time with the student and teach them. I'm a believer in anything you do in life is based on fundamentals. So I want my coaches to really, of course we want to recruit talented men and women who already know fundamentals of the game. They have to have a certain level, but in order for us to be successful, a coach has to start with being fundamentally sound on his or her program. It starts with that. You want coaches who are going to focus on, you're here at Coppin State or any of our institutions to get your education, to get your degree, to prepare you for life. Coach Dixon, as well as all of my coaches, he checked off those boxes. You want coaches who can be ambassadors for the program. They are going to represent Coppin State University, not just coaching that sport, but anything they do, they are representing the university, and they have to be aware of the importance of the decisions they make, the impact that they can have on our alumni, on the community, on faculty, on staff, everyone. So they are truly the faces of our department are our coaches. And when you go through a search, you have to make sure that you feel confident that these men and women are able to represent your department in a manner that you expect. Now, we all are in this business to win. So you also want to hire a coach who you feel confident can develop a program to get you to a championship level you know, as an athletic director, it's up to us to provide resources for the coaches. But given the resources that we're able to give, you want that coach to have a mindset that I'm here to win championships. I know what it takes to win championships, and I know the ingredients that need to be placed in the pot in order for us to gain championship level teams.
And so how do you deal with what I'll call this the Judy Rose syndrome? When I interviewed her, the former athletic director at UNCC, she said after their soccer coach did so well that she hugged him because he knew he was gone. And sure enough, Stanford hired him away. So do you sometimes worry sometimes that you're just sort of operating as developing great coaches for other things? Certainly VCU comes to mind, losing their basketball coach to Texas. Florida golf coach losing their basketball coach to USC. Do you sometimes think that the HBCU legacy will help them stay, or do you just realize that that's just a fact of life in college sports?
Well, any good athletic director is always going to have a list. You're always going to be prepared. You can lose coaches for a number of reasons, but to your point and to your example, if you're losing a coach because another institution is hiring him or her, that means you won. That means you've had a program that's successful.
No, it seriously help you with recruiting down this one thing.
No doubt, no doubt, and it's a part of the business. You're going to lose coaches. Let's put it this way: I'd rather lose a coach because he or she has been successful. This program is at a great level, and they moved on to bigger and better things for their family. I respect that. The worst part is when the coach is not doing that, and you have to make the decision to let him or her move on. So because you're having success, that's a good thing. You'll find there are other good coaches around, and you can find coaches to replace you to maintain and sustain a successful program. But it doesn't bother me at all if I have a coach that has achieved success and he or she can put their families in a better situation, that they feel is a better situation. That's okay. Now, the other thing is the grass is not always greener. And, you know, I've had conversations with coaches. You want to also have a relationship with your coach that you can talk to them and say, you know, they'll come to me and say, listen, I have this opportunity. What do you think? You know, and I'll give them my opinion that, yes, I think it's a good situation for you, or hold it, maybe not. You may not want to venture down that road. So it's all about establishing relationships with your coaches, and you know, we as athletic directors, it's our job to have a solid program, but it's also our job to be mentors and guide our coaches and allow them to maximize their careers.
So Mr. Dowdy, as a great college basketball player, do you find that helps or hurts you when recruiting coaches and then when they're working with them?
No, I want to echo everything that Derek has said. It's a small world. Athletics is a small world. Coaches are moving all around. In our society, people move jobs all the time because of various different reasons. I think from a resource perspective, what we try to do also, we try to cultivate a good assistant coaches level. So in the interim, that if a coach does decide to leave, person could be a viable candidate potentially to move up, knowing the system, knowing what has been successful, and able to take over or be in the position to vie for that job. So I don't look at athletics any differently than society as a whole. I mean, we got people moving from company to company based upon a lot of different variables. So, you know, you have to be ready for change at any time. You got to be certain of the uncertainty and expect the unexpected, because at any moment things can change, and they will change. And if you're not on top of your game as an administrator, you will be shortchanging not only the program but the university as a whole. So I'm constantly in the mode that things could change from today till tomorrow. And we live in a society that happens every single day. There's something new, especially in this political environment as we sit in the chambers right here. So we understand how turbulent that can be at times and how great it could be at other times too. So we got to deal with the good times and prepare for the bad ones.
So Mr. Simpson, when you're dealing with coaches from your F5 background at Florida State, I mean, does they feel that helps you, hurts you? Can you bring in that perspective from being a varsity athlete for Florida State?
Well, I'm also a former coach as well, so I want them to have the same characteristics that I had as a coach. I coached golf at Kentucky State University, where I served as interim AD for a little while. But you know, there's certain characteristics that I look for, but I also want them to develop. So when I even evaluate coaches, I don't evaluate you on wins and losses. What I evaluate you on is your opportunities for professional development. So I sit down with them, create a professional development plan for the year. We do this yearly. And I hold you to this plan that we come up with. I even put money aside into everybody's budget that you have to use for professional development. My thing is, if you're not getting better at your craft, how can we also make our students better at their craft? And how can you learn to teach them better? So, you know, I'm looking for folks who are always learning, who wants to be a champion, who teaches well, but also build relationships and have character and integrity. You know, I don't want to have to sleep with my eyes open every night thinking, you know, they're going to do something that's going to end up in front of the Committee on Infractions, which I chair. You know, I don't want to recuse myself. I want to be able to put them in the best position to succeed. And that comes from them doing the right things when folks are looking and when they're not looking. Because I tell them all the time that I'm responsible for things that are done that I know about and that I don't know about. So those things that I don't know about, I'm relying on you to help us succeed. So I want them to be in the best position to win in the classroom and win on the court or the field. And I want them to put our student athletes in the same position. So as you look at that, and I've had great coaches. I had Terry Long and Jim Long at Florida State. Also, you know, was able to come in contact with Bobby Bowden for a long time. You know, being able to go with Oscar Downs, who was one of the great softball coaches in Division II at Kentucky State. You know, just being around great coaches all the time, you know, allows me to see folks from a different perspective, allowed me to be a good coach myself. That, you know, a guy that never played golf up until, you know, 2007, leading a team to a golf championship in the SIC, the inaugural one in 2014. You know, providing that leadership, providing that development for our students. Those are all the things that I look for, and then holding them accountable for growing as a person and as an individual within their particular sport.
So, Mr. Scott, as a former varsity athlete, how do you work with your coaches to get the best from them and for them at Morgan State?
Well, I think the first thing is I don't try to do their job. I think sometimes, you know, we as athletic directors can get a rap for meddling with our coaches. All my coaches will tell you, any coach I've ever worked with, I don't tell them who to play, I don't tell them how much scholarship to give them, and I don't tell them what plays to run. And the reason is because if you do that, you can't truly assess somebody else's ability to do their job, right? And I think that's really important. Now, when coaches want to come talk to me about things, as Derek said before, I'm all ears. I'll listen, I'll bounce ideas back and forth with them, I'll give them my opinion if they want it. But you never want, when you're evaluating a coach after the end of the season and then later on in the year when you do the formal evaluation for the institution, you don't want them to say you hindered me from doing what I was hired to do. And I think it was Steve Jobs who said, you hire great people and then you get the heck out of their way and let them do their job, right? The other thing, though, I would say this, and I'd be very remiss because you made the comment that I'm the youngest AD on the panel. These gentlemen are, if folks who watch this, they're given a tutorial on the fundamentals of hiring coaches. If you heard what Derek said, he didn't mention team once, he mentioned program every time, right? When he talked about Juan Dixon earlier, building something that's sustainable over periods of time. I mean, he really laid out the fundamentals of a coaching search for you right there. For me, the things I would add, once we get that pool, I think all of us up here would say this, once we get a pool we're comfortable with and we know we have a prospective coach in that pool, then you're looking for fit, you're looking for coachability, you know, you're looking for passion. Because you can't light a fire under somebody's butt if they don't have it. You can't give that to them. But you can rein a coach back in if they do have passion, right? Fit is what Derek was talking about with the institution. Can they be an ambassador for the institution? And most importantly, do their values match those of the institution? Because if not, it's going to come out at some point. You can hide a lot for a while, but eventually everything comes to light. And then coachability, there's times where you got to bring a coach in, you got to coach them, right? And you want coaches that understand it. They may not love it, just like when we were athletes, we didn't love everything our coaches told us. But at the end of the day, when they go home and they process it and they come back and you see them understand why you gave them that instruction, I think as an athletic director, that's really special. Because you have to remember, this is the last thing I'll say about this, is that we're 2 steps away. When we were student athletes, we directly affected the outcome of the competition. when we were coaches, we could put some student athletes in place to directly affect the outcome of the competition. When you're the AD, you're like an owner up in the owner's suite. There's not much you can do anymore, right? So you're hoping that you've laid the groundwork, you've put the resources in place for the coaches to put the student athletes in position for everybody to be successful.
Mr. Davidson, how do you find that passion in your coaches?
Well, I echo what all of my colleagues have said. You want to recruit the best coaches that are available to you. Good coaches want to be successful. They're always looking for other great opportunities. For me, having hired coaches for the past 12 years and have hired coaches who have coaches who won 3 NCAA national championships in bowling, and have had coaches win MEAC championships, and have left. And you encourage those people to go ahead and to pursue those opportunities. For me, in my environment, I'm looking for somebody who wants to be on the Eastern Shore, who wants to be at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. It's a rural community. It may not be for everybody. So,
And how do you find that? How do you figure out that this person wants to be here?
well, you do your homework. You find people who aren't looking at you as a stepping stone, as their next job. Somebody who does not necessarily need the excitement of a larger city, okay, in the entertainment. You're looking for somebody who's probably married, somebody who probably has a family, a young family. My mentor told me something 15 years ago when I got there. He says, Keith, you have to make up your mind. Do you want to make a little money for a long time, or you want to make a lot of money for a little while? Okay, and so that's kind of what we're looking for as it relates to balancing where we are with our resources. Somerset County is one of the poorest counties in Maryland, okay? But we'll pay a basketball coach an excess of $150,000. Now that's not a lot of money in the Power 5 conferences and elsewhere, but it's a good living, okay? And so you have to find those people who enjoy what they're doing, who want to build a program, and who also too would come to a University of Maryland Eastern Shore and want to make it their Duke or North Carolina or UCLA, regardless of what sport they're playing. And also too, like you said, looking for people who want to build a program. And if they build a program, if they leave, you have the foundation in place to move that forward into, like Ed was saying, I'm not ever going to tell anybody who to play, okay, or what plays to run. I'll coach coaches up, because sometimes they need to be coached up just like we coach up student athletes. But you have to build a program, and that comes from the athletic directors as it relates to establishing a culture, who we're looking to bring into our program, because you can plug people in as coaches.
So last question is going to be about your personal style. So I've visited several of you and interviewed you at your campuses, and it's just been amazing how much you guys care about your students. I've watched you firsthand. I don't think you knew I was watching, but anybody who worries about their son or daughter going to play sports for you need not worry. Now, Chris Del Conte, the athletic director at the University of Texas, in his press conference, he said, I'm a crier. I cry when we win. I cry when we lose. I cry when I took this job. Judy Rose told me, who's the athletic director at UNCC, she said, I'm a hugger. I hug when we win, I hug when people leave, I hug my soccer coach. So Mr. Dowdy, are you a crier or a hugger with your players?
Both. Both. And being at HBCUs, I've gotten more hugs than I've ever gotten in my entire career in my previous institution. So they're big huggers. They're very emotional about what they do and how they do things. So I'm both. I'm very, this morning I think I was crying reading over something in the news. I'll tell you the truth, I was reading about Terrell Owens not going to his Hall of Fame induction because I'm getting inducted into my New York Institute of Technology Hall of Fame, and to not go to that ceremony was very emotional for me, for him not to accept that, and all the people that have forged the path for allow him to play football and not to go to that. I thought it was kind of emotional, and I wish he would rethink it. But yes, I'm an emotional individual because I don't think...
Do you think that helps you in your job?
Absolutely.
What about you, Mr. Carter? Are you a hugger, you a crier, or did you pick it up from Morgan Wooten either way?
Well, actually, Morgan Wooten probably was both. And I probably, depending on the time, I would consider myself both. Because what that says about you and it's a passion. And when you are committed to something and you have a passion for something, sometimes you're going to want to cry. Tears of joy or tears of pain.
Sure.
And then sometimes through that process, you're hugging. So it can go either way, but the key is to I think all the gentlemen here, we have a passion for students, we have a passion for education, we have a passion for athletics. And that, when you have that passion, to your question, we can be both huggers and criers.
And I think we have a passion for life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Stinson, that 6'6", 320-pound tackle, I saw you talking to his father. Were you hugging him or crying him after I left?
I'm just like my colleagues. I'm both, because, you know, I still have that competitive edge in me. I still have that coach in me. I still have that, you know, a parent in me as well. Just, you know, you want everybody to succeed. So wins and losses, you feel those tears of joy, tears of pain. I'm there, win or loss, standing in the tunnel, waiting to give my coaches a hug, dapping up my student athletes as they're coming in and out of the tunnel. But I want them to know that I care, and I care about them succeeding. When I walk down the hallway and I see them looking a little down, I'm gonna talk to them. I'm gonna make them, you know, make them know that I'm taking notice, and that helps. And you know, I tell everybody, let me know. There's no way that you can't get in contact with me. I remember I had a student athlete that was going through some trials in his life, and I said, listen, call me whenever you need to. We'll open up the gym, no matter day or night, and I'll go I'll put some shots up with you. So he called me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I met him at the gym. So we put up some shots, we were able to talk, and be candid. He cried, I cried, but he knows I'm there. So
Now, Colin
that's
Powell,
special.
he said when you're a leader, if nobody comes to you with their problems anymore, you've got problems for two reasons. They don't think you can solve them, or they don't think you care. So clearly you live that out.
Yeah. I want folks to know that I care and I'm paying attention. And I'm going to be there for you, and I'm going to provide resources.
So, Mr. Scott, on the bus, after you tell the players to study like you, do you hug them or cry along with them?
I would say I'm just like everybody else up here. It's got to be a little bit of both. And you know, I'm very fortunate. I have DC and I have Keith who are in the conference with me. I've known DC before being AD at Morgan, and Keith and I have struck up a great relationship. I think if you ask those gentlemen or anybody else who knows me, I'm dripping full of passion.
Well, I remember when I interviewed you at Morgan, you told me that you make sure your players eat well. You said you want those football players in football shape. You want the basketball players eating lean protein. Is that another way of showing them how much you care?
Absolutely, and I'm a lover. I guess that's what I would call it, right? You know, you spend a lot of time in life trying to get to a certain position, right? And for us, it's been the position of athletic director. What you don't realize when you get there is the effect that you're having on people's lives on a daily basis until something happens, either good or bad. And so to give you an example, the young lady Danielle Thompson and her teammates, when they came to see me, because I FaceTimed with them before the championship, when they came to see me when they got back, I hugged every one of them. And I made sure I asked them first, can I get you a hug? But I wanted to give them a hug to let them know and feel how proud I was of them. The hardest thing that any of us have to do is when you lose a student athlete. Toughest thing I've ever had to do in my life as a professional was call the mom of Saif Bryant. I don't have children like my colleagues, some of my colleagues up here do, and to tell a mother that I don't know the pain you're going through, but I want to let you know that your son was part of our family, and therefore you are too forever.
What was her response?
And she said, that's all I can ask, because my son loved being a bear, so thank you. And then I just sat there and I just let her cry. And I cried that day. I talked to my wife and I said, you know, that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. So I think if you don't do a little bit of both, I don't know that you're human. And in this profession, it's like a roller coaster. And so you got to enjoy the highs while you have them. You work through the lows. And I'm an old baseball player. So what I learned is that you're never as good as your best day. You're never as bad as your worst. You hope to be somewhere in the middle. And that's the approach I use.
Mr. Davidson, what do you think the parents of your student athletes appreciate most about your personal touch?
You'd have to really kind of ask them. I know I have evolved over the past 15 years. I probably started out as a crier. You know, when I first started, I cried. I think probably because I was a bit overwhelmed. First, a lot of emotions in terms losing my mentor, Nelson Townsend, who was moving on, and then probably a little bit unsure in terms of, trying to figure out, am I ready? And over the course of years, I've learned to maybe not be so emotional, but I've also learned
Work for Chris Del Conte.
yeah, I've learned the value of a hug. For me, I'm an old preacher's kid, okay? And so I go back a lot on my foundation from my faith. And my approach to my job is I look at this as my ministry. And so I try to focus on those types of things that I've learned as it relates to trust and respect and openness and kindness. And that's what I want to promote, not only to my student athletes, but to my coaches and my administrators as it relates to my expectations of how we're supposed to treat each other, okay? And if you work from those areas, then you'll know when to give a hug, you'll know when you need to cry, or you know when you need to grab somebody by the collar, okay? And so that's how I try to figure out where I'm at emotionally and how I need to deal with people.
Thank you very much. Before we sign off, I want to thank our sponsors who made today possible. We have John Schreiber with the law firm of Reed Smith, with the leading practice in loss of value insurance. We have James Houck, the editorial director for What's Up Media, one of the largest magazine publishers in America. We have Dr. Caroline Silby, a leading sports psychologist. We have Randy Grieg from the Lutheran Mission Society. And most important of all, I want to thank Senator Ed Riley, who was able to get the room today and made this all for us possible. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully same time next year here. Thank you very much. It's Jonathan Yates. Thank you for joining us.